The Vietnam War was a major conflict that lasted from 1955 to 1975, primarily in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The conflict resulted in 1954 after Ho Chi Minh defeated the French in the Indochina War, and the Geneva Convention divided Vietnam into two central regions, North Vietnam and South Vietnam. In 1960, Southern revolutionaries of Vietnam, backed by communists from the National Liberation Front known as Viet Cong, will result in a full conflict. In 1965, the U.S. will officially invade Vietnam, and American troops will fight their first large-scale battle against the North Vietnamese Army. This conflict will dramatically escalate until 1975 with the fall of Saigon. One central figure throughout the war was a Vietnam veteran. During the Vietnam War, there were more than 58,000 servicemen and women who lost their lives. To this day, the Vietnam veterans are the largest cohort of American veterans in terms of service era. They still struggle to this day with many health disparities due to the war. While we generally tend to think of Vietnam veterans in terms of battle, there were many central roles in which soldiers played in the War of Vietnam. One of these that became most notable for it was Adrian Cronje. Adrian Cronje was an American Air Force airman and the host of an armed services radio station in Vietnam. Cronje has earned two 1991 gold medals from the New York Radio Festival for his role in the American Forces Vietnam Network. He is most notable for the 1987 American war comedy film Good Morning Vietnam, which was based on his life and starred Robin Williams. There were several key military leaders, one of whom was General Westmoreland. Born as William Childs Westmoreland, he was a U.S. Army general who had served as commander of the U.S. forces during the Vietnam War from 1964 to 1968. During his tenure as commander, he received both praise and heavy criticism for his tactic in Vietnam, a strategy of attrition that attempted to drain manpower and supplies. However, many praised him for his willingness to engage in difficult battles despite circumstances he couldn't control. Others greatly accused him of vastly underestimating the enemy. Westmoreland was one of the most central figures with the Vietnam War, and one of the most symbolic as well. At times controversial, but vastly more complex than most could understand. Another central leader was Lieutenant General Barry Richard McCaffrey, better known as Lieutenant General McCaffrey. He served as advisory duty with the Army of the Republic of Vietnam from 1966 to 1967. From 1968 to 69, he would serve as a company commander with the 1st Cavalry Division. He has received 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, as well as 2 Silver Stars and 3 Purple Hearts for his service. He retired as a 4-star general and the youngest at the time in 2001. One of the most controversial figures, though, would by far be the Secretary of Defense. Robert Strange McNamara served as the Secretary of Defense under both John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. He is today the longest-serving Secretary of Defense in U.S. history, with a combined history of military active duty in the U.S. Air Force and as a businessman with the Ford Motor Company. He became a central controversial figure that has played a huge influence on America today. He became notable for implementing what is known as policy analysis and creating 2 central agencies of the Pentagon, the Defense Intelligence Agency and Defense Supply Agency, which would dramatically transform the U.S. Defense Department and foreign policy. McNamara launched one of the most controversial programs, called Project 100,000, which lowered the IQ standards for U.S. recruitment, resulting in over 354,000 additional men being recruited to the War of Vietnam. The Vietnam War was filled with many controversial moments, one of which was known as the Napalm Girl, a Pulitzer Award-winning photograph of a young girl named Phan Thi Kim Phuc. She was the victim of a South Vietnamese bombing of napalm bombs in Trang Bang, which had been occupied by North Vietnamese forces. As one of the survivors of this incident, she would become known as Kim Phuc, who was photographed by an AP photographer. Another essential controversial leader was the Vietnamese politician Ngo Dinh Diem, who had been born into a prominent Catholic family and served as president of South Vietnam. He had served as Prime Minister of Vietnam from 1954 to 55, and then as President of South Vietnam from 1955 until his assassination in 1963. While many praised him for his anti-communist views, in the U.S. even backing him for them, many greatly condemned him and seen him as a theological oppressor due to his heavy persecution of Vietnamese Buddhists, which led to the Buddhist crisis of 1963. The end of the Vietnam War was seen with the fall of Saigon, the capture of Saigon by the People's Army of Vietnam and Viet Cong, which marked the ending of the Vietnam War and the transition period to the formal reunification of Vietnam in the Socialist Republic of Vietnam as it stands today. This fall in conflict would start with the 1975 Spring Offensive, an offensive of the People's Army of Vietnam, which invaded and captured the key Central Highlands and Buon Mae Thuot in March of 1975. This conflict will escalate into the invasion of Saigon in April of 1975, and eventually its fall, after the South Vietnamese forces held over 60,000 troops in defense. The North Vietnamese of 250,000 troops will eventually invade and capture Saigon. Within that month, the entirety of Saigon will be evacuated, including both Vietnamese Catholics, Americans, intellectuals, businessmen, and others who faced heavy persecution by the communists who took over. By April, President Gerald Ford announces Operation Baby Lift, which will evacuate over 2,000 orphans from the nation of Vietnam to the United States. We can see many modern influences and effects today. It has played a major role in our culture, ranging from civilian and military relationships to foreign relations to policy and politics and cultural perception of war. The damaging relationship between U.S. civilians who took an anti-war approach and American soldiers would remain hostile until at least the 1980s. The distrust and particularly failed relationship of the fall of Saigon and the failed leadership of Ngo Dinh Diem would prove fatal to American foreign relations, particularly civilians' trust in foreign policy decisions. The decreased IQ standards by Robert McNamara, the creation of policy analysis and intelligence agencies will deepen not only the industrial structure of America, but the military-industrial complex as well. Thank you.